Hello and welcome to the Whale Hunting Podcast, where we shine a light onto the hidden worlds of money and power. I'm Tom, and this week I'm joined by Zeke Faux, a friend of Project Brazen, an investigative journalist for Bloomberg, and author of the book Number Go Up, Inside Crypto's Wild Rise and Staggering Fall. Welcome, Zeke.
Thanks.
So Zeke, last year you came out with your wonderful book Number Go Up, which rightly has won amazing plaudits across the board, and I hope you sold quite a few copies. Now you've got a sort of an ending to at least part of your story with Sam Bankman-Fried's sentencing. You were in the courtroom, right?
Yes, I have to admit I did not camp out. I saw on Twitter that one of the other reporters got in line at 11 p.m. in the rain, and I decided to watch from the overflow room. So you can show up right at 9 and watch a live stream. If you're in the courtroom, it is cool, but you're looking at the back of Sam Bankman-Fried's head, so you can't see his reactions really. So
he obviously stole $8 billion in customer money. His lawyers were asking for 5.5 years. The prosecution was asking for 50 years, and he got 25 years. Paint for us like the reactions on the faces of his parents, or at least of his supporters. Were people in shock or disbelief at this?
Sam, stood impassively with his hands folded. His parents also looked glum. They, looked down, they looked out the window. It was not, I don't think, a shock. Bankman-Fried had made some kind of interesting arguments about why the judge might want to consider giving him an even lower sentence. But I think that he knew those were a long shot. The judge wasn't very sympathetic to him during the trial. So there's been kind of a surprise twist in the FTX story, which is that at the trial, if anything, I learned that the fraud at FTX was worse than I thought. From early on, they were taking customer money and gambling with it, doing whatever they wanted with it. But some of these gambles actually paid off. And a couple months ago, the lawyers who are in control of the bankrupt FTX now said, hey, we're not 100% sure, but things are looking pretty good. We think we've been able to reclaim enough assets that we will eventually be able to sell them for more than $8 billion and return everyone's money in full.
That's partly because he made a very judicious investment in an Anthropic AI, an AI company, right?
Yeah, the lawyers haven't given a good enough accounting of this yet, but he made $1 billion or $2 billion in profit on this investment in Anthropic, the AI company, which he, to his credit, he made before this was the hot topic. And he also made a big venture investment in a blockchain called Solana. And this netted 50 million Solana tokens for FTX. And the price of Solana after FTX failed, or while it was failing, it crashed. And it got down to like $9 a coin. But now Solana has climbed like more than tenfold, and the estate is sitting on a $10 billion profit on these Solana tokens alone. Now, they're hard to sell. Some of them are locked up for years, so the only way to sell them is through private deals with hedge funds who are willing to buy them at a discount and take the risk that the price will fall over the next couple of years. But even still, it's going to be a huge profit if they can unload those anytime soon.
It's basically a victimless crime. I mean, the $8 billion that was stolen will get returned. And so partly that's to do with this AI investment. And as you're explaining, partly it's to do with the fact that since your book came out, Number Go Up came out, and since Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested and all of this, crypto has continued to do well, right?
Yeah,
Prices are up.
Yes, the numbers are all up, and that has made a lot of money for the estate. I will say the victims are still not happy because their recovery is fixed at the value in crypto at the time FTX failed. So if you had one Bitcoin on FTX, you're going to get back at best $20,000, and you might reasonably say, hey, a Bitcoin is worth 70 now. Why don't I get that? And I mean, you can say victimless crime, but I was just arguing about this with one of my neighbors. And I was like, hey, let's say I steal your car, and then when the police come, I give it back. No harm, no foul. A lot of crimes, when you catch the person, you might get the assets back. And some of these assets he's giving back are like his penthouse, the $400 million he sent to a different ex-girlfriend, not Caroline Ellison, for her crypto hedge fund. So,
oh, really? I haven't heard about that one. Who's that?
It's somebody he knew from Jane Street. There's nothing out there about her, but he was trying to start sort of a feud between her and Ellison. And he wrote a whole memo about how his ex-girlfriend Ellison, she ran his hedge fund Alameda Research. And he was like, I've been thinking about it. I think this new hedge fund, Modulo, is looking pretty good. Why don't we put our money in Modulo? And it was also run by someone he had a relationship with.
So he's going to go to jail in probably a pretty minimum security jail somewhere on the West Coast. Do we know where he's going?
The way it works in the US, the judge doesn't actually control that. The judge issues a recommendation to the Bureau of Prisons. The judge said that he would recommend that Sam be sent to a medium security prison. Based on the length of his sentence, he could go to a high security prison, but medium security is still like a pretty terrible prison. And it would be out in California near his family. And, it's pretty likely the Bureau of Prisons would respect that. It was kind of interesting. In the courtroom, it was sort of like the judge felt, I've listened to this whole story, and now I'm not just going to give a sentence. I'm going to tell you what I think of all of you guys. Like, I listened for 6 weeks, now it's my turn. And it seemed like he was heading for a harsher sentence. He totally demolished all of Bankman-Fried's arguments. He said this recovery is irrelevant. It's like if a thief went to Las Vegas and played the slots and hit it big and then offered to give the money back, it wouldn't reduce their sentence. And a lot had been made about Sam's neurodivergence. And the judge said, hey, listen, this guy is autistic, but that's what let him accomplish so much. He was raised with every privilege. He didn't have a lot of sympathy for him there.
Let me just quote from the judge here. He said, when he wasn't outright lying, he was evasive, hair-splitting, dodging questions. I've been doing this job for close to 30 years, and I've never seen a performance quite like that. I mean, that's just shocking, right? Like,
yes.
He was angry by the end of the trial, having had to sit through. I mean, just tell the listeners a little bit about what Sam did some of the things he did on the stand. I mean, he mocked prosecutors, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I was just rereading it, and there was a kind of typical exchange where the prosecution, to tease them a little bit, they never missed a chance to emphasize that Sam was rich, because they figured, I think, the jury would not be sympathetic to a rich person. So they said, hey, don't you remember flying on a private jet to the Super Bowl? And Sam said, I don't recall. And then they said, you don't remember? And he said, I don't remember. And the prosecutor said, is that because you flew on private jets so much? And he eventually admitted that he had flown on a charter jet. That's the hair splitting. They also
so he really didn't get himself into the good graces of the judge with that kind of behavior.
He argued about whether he'd had dinner with Bill Clinton. He's like, I don't remember if like a full meal was served. The judge had to tell him, please answer the question several times. He said, I don't recall more than 100 times. I don't know what he was thinking. It didn't come off well to the judge, to the jury, and he didn't present an alternative story that the jury could latch on to. It was like he hadn't adjusted to the idea that all of his friends had turned on him and testified against him.
So that leads us to what's going to happen to them. So obviously Caroline Ellison, we talked about her, that was his former girlfriend who turned state's witness and was crucial to getting the conviction and now the sentencing. She will now face her own sentencing?
Yes. Cooperators don't get sentenced until their services are no longer needed. So now that Sam's been sentenced, I think we can move on to that. It could be that there's some sort of ancillary case that they might have to work on before they'll get their sentence. I've heard that in white-collar cases, cooperators generally are sentenced to no prison time. In this case, I mean, they did participate in a massive fraud. I wouldn't be surprised if they had to serve some time in prison, but we'll see.
Well, we should talk about Tim Leissner, the former Goldman partner who helped defraud $200 million from the Malaysian fund 1MDB. And he's still not been sentenced. Like he cooperated, pleaded guilty, cooperated, and he's still not been sentenced. And that crime was carried out over a decade ago now.
And I think that's because they haven't caught Joe Lowe. So they're like, listen, go live your life, but if we ever catch him, you're coming back to court.
maybe quietly sometime next year, we'll hear that Caroline, Nishad Singh, and Gary are all back in finance with a startup with some great investment from Mark Andreessen or something.
Yeah, Nashad is working as a software engineer somewhere, and Caroline and Gary, I'm not sure. Adam Yedidia, another FTX guy who testified, got a job as a high school math teacher.
So Nishad, we should say, is the guy who helped create the code, backdoor code that allowed them to steal the $8 billion. So he's got a job elsewhere as a software engineer?
Yeah, we don't know where, but I believe that's the case. And I have to say, this guy, so I spent time with Sam after the fraud was revealed, but also at the peak. I was down in the Bahamas back in 2022 when things were going great, and I spent some time with Nashad. Sam, I thought, all right, this is a pretty aggressive guy. Like, could he be up to something? It wasn't shocking to me that he'd be up to no good. Although, to be clear, like, I did not identify his fraud while it was happening. Nashad, he seemed like he couldn't hurt a fly. Like, he was one of the sweetest. He was like painfully sincere. And when I asked him questions about the crypto world, it almost seemed like he didn't know much about it. Like, he was so focused on managing software engineers that he wasn't following crypto prices. He didn't know about big characters in the crypto world that you'd expect him to. It's kind of hard to believe, but he claimed at the trial he did not realize what was really going on until September, just 2 months before FTX failed. It's still kind of far-fetched because he'd participated in meetings where they should have been, it seems like they were talking about it. But from my conversation with him, I could kind of imagine how it might go over his head. Like, I'm not even sure how much he knew about the financial world.
Right. So we're going to have to wait to see what happens to all of those characters. So Zeke, Sam is obviously not going to accept this. He's appealing. Does he have any chance of that being successful?
In the U.S. criminal system, the odds are against you on these types of appeals. He's got to raise specific legal issues during the trial that were decided wrongly by the judge during the trial. And that's tough to do.
So tell us a bit more about what's going on in the broader crypto world since, this whole story broke and since your book came out. Bitcoin is at records again, is that right?
Yeah, Bitcoin's back up to a record. And some people are saying, hey, this time is different. Wall Street's involved. The big institutions are buying. Finally, it's getting this mainstream acceptance because in the US, regulators approved the creation of Bitcoin ETFs. So now you can go in your, Fidelity, Schwab, whatever you use to trade stocks for your retirement account, you can buy Bitcoin in there. The way I see it, you don't even need any of those people. You just need enough people to start to coalesce around this idea and be like, oh yeah, the ETF is coming. I think it's going to go up. And then it does start to go up because of that sort of collective belief. So, and I would say that it's not just Bitcoin. Almost every cryptocurrency has doubled or tripled since the lows after FTX's failure. And that also kind of belies the Bitcoin narrative because none of those cryptocurrencies are finding their way to Wall Street. No one's invented any new use case. Nobody's even talking about DeFi or Web3 or NFTs. Somehow the prices, though, are just going up without any buzz.
Right. So there's no use case for it. I think you mentioned in the book how you can't really do anything with Bitcoin even today, right?
Yeah, just because people are buying it, it doesn't mean there's anything to do with it. It's pure number go up thinking. And I've actually seen a lot of crypto people talking more about number go up and saying, hey, number go up technology, it's working. Look at these prices.
Which is always just another way of describing a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, and I maintain that if something does not generate real value, real usefulness in the long run, it will not maintain its value. But it's very hard to predict what will happen over the short or medium term.
What do you make of the Bitcoin enthusiasts who say from a sort of macroeconomic perspective, they talk about the US public debt and the inflation worries and all of this, and that Bitcoin's an important future digital currency. Does that have any weight, or is that normally people who have a reason to want to support it because they're trading it and the numbers going up?
The argument is that the way that Bitcoin is coded, there can only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, and thus they are scarce and will be valuable. The counter argument to this is that just because there's not too many of something does not make it valuable. I spent a while trying to find something else that there's 21 million of. I settled on VHS tapes of the movie Toy Story, and there's only 21 million of those were produced. Plus, the factories have been destroyed. Probably a lot of people just tossed them in the trash, so there's probably way fewer than 21 million that still exist. And they're only worth $4. So you're still, Bitcoin may be scarce, but there's no law that its value has to increase because of that scarcity. And the Bitcoiners like to say, yeah, what about inflation? The value of the dollar is eroding. But as I got this argument so many times with them, I would say, listen, I'm not sitting on a big pile of dollars. I'm buying, shares of Coca-Cola. And if there's inflation, they will probably raise the price of Coca-Cola. And every Coke that they sell, I'm going to get some fraction of a penny. That's kind of how investing works. Buying a coin that has no inherent usefulness or value, I don't think is the solution in the long run. But for now, they're laughing at me. So, they're listening to this and thinking, oh, this guy's such a boomer. He doesn't get it. My portfolio tripled last year. So enjoy it while it lasts.
What do I care? Well, we talked about victims earlier and a victimless crime, and it wasn't a victimless crime. People lost their money in the US and across the world. But also in Number Go Up, you go off to Cambodia and you go to these pig butchering. You go and look into these pig butchering scams, which are where, well, you explain it.
Yeah, so these are the text messages that we all get that seem like they're a wrong number. And as you might suspect, those people are trying to scam you. They'll try to be your friend and eventually try to lure you into trading cryptocurrency. If you do send them money, eventually, once you send them enough, they steal it. And what I wrote about in the book and why I went to Cambodia is there's a horrible part of this that the people who send those messages are often themselves victims of human trafficking. And there are these huge compounds, like office parks, full of workers who've traveled from across Southeast Asia, lured with the offer of good jobs and customer service. Then they're trapped, their passports are taken, they're told to scam. If they don't hit their quotas, they're beaten, electrocuted, or even killed. They have to pay ransoms if they want to get out.
The reason I bring it up is because one of the biggest movies in China last year was called No More Bets. And it was basically a movie that did huge box office numbers in China. And it's about Chinese people going to Cambodia and it's a fiction, but it's a film, but it's about them going there. And I think the Chinese government was very happy for this to become a successful film. It got past the censors in China because it's such a worry for them that so many Chinese are ending up in these scams, these crypto-related scams in China, right?
So since the book has come out, the scale of the problem has become more clear. The United Nations estimated that 200,000 people may be trapped in scam compounds in Southeast Asia. And John Griffin, a professor at the University of Texas, he, through some research on the blockchain, he estimated that these scam compounds have collected $75 billion from victims over the last couple of years. And the reason why I got interested in this is that crypto has supercharged this. Like, these types of scams have always been around, but it used to be a lot harder to move money around the world. And with crypto, you can reach out to, some old guy in Iowa, and he can zap you $100,000 instantly without knowing your real name, with no refunds. And yeah, scammers love it. It's great for them. So it's kind of, the problem seems at this point kind of intractable, but there are, government to government level meetings and plans being hatched to try to crack down on some of these. Tom, what about CZ, Sam's biggest rival? His sentencing's coming up for his money laundering case. What do you expect to happen there?
I mean, I guess he flew into the country from the UAE, right? He must have had, in my view, I don't have any inside information on this, but I think he must have had some kind of deal or thought he had some kind of deal when he did that, right? Because he could have stayed outside in a country without an extradition treaty with America.
Right. They offered him
Flew
something
back.
that made him think, hey, you know what? I'd rather face justice than live as an exile. I've seen it reported that he expects to get 1.5 years, but I don't know that the judge is bound by that.
He was trying to return to see his family in Dubai, and then a judge in Seattle decided to revoke that travel, and he was put into jail. He's been in jail ever since then, right?
Yes, it'd be 4 or 5 months now. His sentencing has to be coming up soon.
Yeah. I mean, people at one point were saying the situations were quite similar, right? You know, you had this company called Merit Peak that seemed to be taking money out, but I think in the end there was no mass misuse of customer funds in the way there was at FTX, right? At Binance. So
Yeah.
I think he's facing his charges are narrower, aren't they? They're things like mis-selling to Americans and Hezbollah, allowing Hamas to use Binance as a money laundering platform, basically. Stuff like
Yes,
that.
which is taken quite seriously over here.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's bad stuff. Yeah. But it's just, I think at one point we were all asking ourselves, is Binance going to be just the same thing as FTX? And it didn't quite turn out to be that, I don't think.
Right. No, the crypto world took his arrest as good news. They're like, well, if he stole all the money, they probably would tell us now. So it's safe to trade on Binance.
There's no doubt that the crypto is still a place where bottom feeders like to go fish, basically. A lot of victims and a lot of dirt. Zeke, I can't wait to see what you do next covering this space. I think crypto is going to be around, and it's going to churn up a lot more malfeasance, if you ask me. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Tom.
That's it for this week. Thanks to Zeke for joining us. You can find Zeke's book Number Go Up online and in all good bookshops. The best way to stay up to date with whale hunting is to hit follow wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can also subscribe to the Whale Hunting newsletter for updates on the shadowy lives of the powerful and ultra-wealthy at whalehunting.projectbrazen.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week for more.
Whale Hunting is a production of Project Brazen. It's hosted by me, Tom Wright, and Bradley Hope. It's produced by Megan Dean and Claire Urban. At Project Brazen, Mariangel Gonzalez is our project manager, and Megan Dean is network manager. Ryan Ho is the creative director, with additional design from Andrea Claridge. For more from Whale Hunting and to subscribe to our newsletter, visit whalehunting.projectbrazen.com.